Hey guys, what's going on? My name's Philip. I also go by Nightmare6, and we are back again with another Marvel conversion to Heroes Unlimited. This time we're going with Darkhawk, who is 90s character. He's been through a couple of versions. We're going to go deal with the younger version of him when he first pretty much premiered. So this is back when he is still a high school student. In this case, we're going to give him skills as if he was a high school graduate. But that being said, let's get into it. So originally I was going to go with Mystic Bestowed, but I decided to keep it with Enchanted Object because of the talisman and his reliance on it. So at this point in time, he still believes he needs the talisman to transform into Darkhawk. As you can see here, this is his entry for his Gamer's Handbook of the Marvel Universe, book number 8. And we are dealing with an early version of Darkhawk back when he pretty much first started, where he's still a high school student before he finds out he's part of an order called the Fraternity of the Raptors, before he becomes an officer of the NYPD. So the first things first, we decided to figure out his level, which I did simply by taking his karma, which is a combination of reason, intuition, and psyche, all of which you can see right here. And what we did was we took those three numbers, we combined them, and which is already represented here under karma. And then we just divided it by 8, which is the number of attributes in Palladium. Rounded it down, we got 3. From there, we just did PPE, which is your standard 66. So that was nothing special. That's pretty much by the book. So 4 plus 1d4, we rolled a 4. So because of that, we rolled an extra die, which gave us another 2. So in the end, it was 4 plus 4 plus 2, which equals out to 10. So his IQ of 10, which is average. From there, we went on to his mental endurance, which, as you can see here, is a combination of reason and intuition divided by 2. So reason and intuition is poor and typical. So that's 10 divided by 2. That's 5. We check our chart again. That's typical. It says 8 plus 1d4. So we got 8 plus 1d4. We rolled a 4 again. So we already got 12 plus another 3 from the extra reroll. That gave us a 15 mental endurance. All right, up next is Mental Affinity, which is a combination of his intuition and psyche. Now, he has 2 different stats, because his human form is just typical and typical, which is 6 plus 6, so that's 12 divided by 2. Again, just brings us back down to 6. And when you compare it against the chart, that gives him typical, so that would be 8 plus 1d4, which, nothing fancy there. We rolled a 1, gave us a Mental Affinity of 9, which is fine for a regular human being. For superhero persona, we have intuition of typical, which is 6, plus a psyche of 20. So that gives us 26 divided by 2. That gives us 13, which when you check the chart, 13 falls under good. That's 11 plus 1d4. And so here you see here, we rolled 11 plus a 4, which is max for that roll. So that gives us another chance to reroll and add in. So again, another 1d4 gives us a 3. We got a total of 18. His strength and endurance in the Darkhawk form, remarkable. His strength and endurance in human form, typical. So again, typical, nothing fancy, 8 plus 1d4. Whereas the superhero form is remarkable, so that's 30, and that gives us 19 plus 1d6. So for strength, we rolled a 1d4, add that to his base of 8 for his human form. We have an athletic skill, which gives a plus 1, so he gets a total of 12. For his regular human form. For his Darkhawk form, we have a 19 plus a 1d6, which we rolled a 6. So we rolled another d6 to add to that, and again we rolled a 6. But that's it, we don't re-roll again. So now we have a 31, plus the plus 1 bonus from athletics. So we got a total of 32. Going to his agility, his human form has good agility. We have remarkable for his Darkhawk form. Checking the chart, typical, 8 plus 1d4, remarkable, 19 plus 1d6. So that comes out to 11 plus 1d4 for under good, and for remarkable, 19 plus 1d6. So we rolled, for human form, we rolled a 4 on the 1d4. That gives us another plus. Got a 3. So 11 plus 7, we got 18. We have full ambidexterity, so that gives us a plus 1 to PP, and we have a plus 1 for the sport skill. So that gives us a total plus 2. So his power has a prowess total of 20. For Darkhawk, we have 19. We rolled a 2 for the 1d6 modifier, plus a 1d4 for the enchanted object bonus. That gives us 25. Add in the plus 2 total from ambidexterity and sport, and that gives us a total of 27 physical prowess for Darkhawk. Physical endurance, again, we're back to typical for Chris Powell, remarkable for Darkhawk. And again, that just brings us back to the modifiers of 8 plus 1d4 and remarkable 19 plus 1d6. Nothing fancy here. We rolled a 3 for Chris Powell, but as an optional rule in my game, if you have the physical skill program, we give you a +1 to a physical attribute. In this case, we put in the physical endurance. So in the end, Chris Powell has a physical endurance of 12. For Darkhawk, he starts off at 19. We roll a 1d6 modifier, so that gives us a 3. So it gave us 22. And he does have healing factor, which we'll get to later, so that adds a +7 bonus. So that gives him a PE of 29. Up next is Physical Beauty. For Darkhawk, it's nothing fancy because it's a combination of endurance mixed with agility. So that's 30, so that just comes out to 30. But for Chris Powell, it's typical and good. Now, typical normally is 6, and good is 10, so that's 16 divided by 2, that gives us 8. So we have 11 plus 1d4 for Chris Powell, and remarkable, we have 19 plus 1d6 for Darkhawk. So here we rolled a 1, and we rolled a 2 for both respectively. So Chris has a Physical Beauty of 12. Darkhawk has a Physical Beauty of 21. Now, for Darkhawk, especially in this form, there is a special circumstance where if his helmet gets removed, he will have a horror factor, and that will negate his physical beauty later on. So we'll get to that a little bit later, but if you read the comics, you'll see anytime people removed his helmet in Darkhawk form, people pretty much wanted to vomit. And we do realize later on why. It's because his underneath, it's the body of an android. So up next is speed. And for that, we're doing Chris Powell first. So we have endurance and agility. So typical 6, good is 10. So that's 16 divided by 2. That's 8 plus 15, which is the number of feet in a Marvel area, which is the measure of distance. He's got a speed of 23, which equals excellent. So you see for Chris Powell, we rolled a 1d4, rolled a 2, plus 5 from his athletics. Total of 23 for Darkhawk, remarkable. So divided by 2, combining them is just, again, remarkable, 30 points. A modifier of 15, it's 45, is equal to incredible. So it gives us a 24 plus 1d6 modifier. So as you can see, we have 16 plus 1d4, rolled a 2, 18 plus 5 from athletic skill. Comes out to 23. Darkhawk's 24 plus the 3 equals 27. We got plus 5 modifier, again from athletics. That comes out to 32. And that is it for his physical attributes. Alright, so we're going to go into Darkhawk's abilities. His body can heal when he transforms back, and I figure that's a good representation of his super healing from healing factor. So basically when he needs to transform and emergency heal, whatever, those 2 times per day, that's what he does, and it'll restore the android body. His main thing is his armor, his grappling claw, his energy blast, and energy shield, as well as his ability to glide. At this point, he only glides. He doesn't know he can actually fly. That'd be more like a later form. For his energy blast and his ability to create force fields from his chest, that's basically your create force field power. Just instead of originating from the hands, they'll come from his chest. Aside from that, since we are building him as an enchanted object, we did roll 100. So the gem functions as a 6th level character, or all powers from the gem function at 6th level. Now that's not going to increase as he goes up in levels. That's not going to decrease if he loses levels somehow. It's always going to be remaining consistent at 6th level. Also, just as an FYI, because it is an enchanted object, every time he uses his abilities, he will be draining the item of its PPE. So he does have a limited number of uses per day he can of the gem. And as you can see, he can create the force shield, which lasts up to 20 minutes. He gets a +3 instead of the normal +2, which we'll get to in a moment. He can use that as pairing an attack. So if someone's coming at him, he can quickly throw a force field up in front of him to protect himself, to parry the attack, and that'll get a +3 instead of the normal +2. And that's the +3, the extra bonus is because he's taken a skill for super ability for that power. And we'll get to that later when we get to skills. Force fields, he can project it to other people. The SDC of the force fields is reliant on his pool. The create force field power does have a pool, in his case 2,900 points total. So anytime he fires energy blast, it takes away from that, as well as his PPE for the gem, as well as other force fields will be weakened by that much. So he can create one regular force field for himself at full SDC, but then if he does that, he can't fire any energy blast unless he weakens his own force field. He can also create additional force fields to protect people away from him, but each one will drain points from that energy pool. So say he has two force fields, one for himself and one protecting another person a couple of feet away from him. At max, without using anything and assuming he hasn't wasted any points, he would be limited to 1,450 SDC for both force fields. The only problem is every time he maintains additional force fields besides the one on himself, it's going to reduce his number of attacks and give him penalties to initiative because he's focusing on trying to maintain the other force fields. He has 2,900 SDC. He could create 290 force fields. They all don't have to have 100 SDC. They all can have less than 100 SDC, but they cannot have more than 100 SDC because the maximum SDC per force field is whatever is shared. His next power is gliding, which is limited to 50 miles an hour or 25 miles an hour indoors. But if he's coming from a really great height, like say jumping off an airplane, a glider, a skyscraper, or he's flying, gliding in strong winds, like say a hurricane, he can easily reach up to 120 miles an hour. When he's airborne, he gets bonuses to combat. In this case, he has a +2 to initiative, strike, and parry instead of your normal +1, as well as a +3 to dodge instead of your normal +2. And again, this is because he's spending skills in super ability for that power alone. And we'll get to that again in a minute. Up next are his claws. They're similar to Wolverine's. He's got 3 on each hand. He can do 3d6 damage in combat, but he can also fire them up to 150 feet away, and there's a grappling cable attached to him that can support up to his physical strength and weight. He can also fire them at opponents, but because they don't have as much strength behind them, they only do 1d6. But he does get a +1 to strike with the claws, again because he's spending a skill in super ability to know how to use the claws. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So like I said before, he does have a horror factor if his helmet gets removed. It's a horror factor of 15, and if the person fails their saving throw, he gets a +15% bonus to the skill interrogation techniques, or if he's helping someone in an interrogation. Unfortunately, himself, he does not have the skill, but it's still gross to look at. His only other ability is supervision, and that's advanced sight. He can see things, in this case, up to 7 miles. And like I was saying before, because he is an enchanted object character, the talisman itself does have a PPE pool of 210, and each time he uses any of these abilities, it's going to cost him 12 PPE. And while he's using those abilities, the gem on his chest does faintly glow. So it's fine if you're in daylight, but if you're in the dark, people might see and they might eventually put 2 and 2 together. I don't know. Depends on the character's intelligence and if they have any skills that help give them any sort of deductive reasoning. Alright, up next is skills. So in this case, I decided to give him 3 out of the 4 normal skills that most characters in Heroes Unlimited get. Of the 3, as you can see here, I gave him language and literacy in English, and he gets mathematics basic, but he does not get pilot automobile. And that's more because we've never really seen him drive early on. And also, not for nothing, he's from New York City, and most people in New York City do not drive unless they live out in like Staten Island or the outer boroughs of like the Bronx or distant Queens. Now, as a high school graduate, he does have 2 programs, which give him a +5% bonus. And we really don't see too much skills coming from him in the comics, aside from like later on when he does become a police officer, but that's much further. So here we decided to just give him physical programs. So we give him hand-to-hand expert because he does have some martial art experience in the comics. In the comics, they say he has some kendo training. So because he only has some, we're gonna give him benefit of doubt and say he's at least a good scrapper, especially from training as Darkhawk. So we'll say he has hand-to-hand expert. Not enough to be martial artist, but he's got enough to at least have some basic self-defense. We also give him athletics because he is still a kid that was kind of athletic, playing sports and stuff, running around, and then of course the whole vigilante superhero part. Give him some prowl because prowling, Darkhawk, running around, chasing after criminals, can't be making noise. Swimming, because, yeah, not for nothing. He's been knocked into the Hudson River and East River a few times. I'm sure he's learned how to swim by now, if anything. And then we have the super abilities, like I mentioned. So the other three remaining physical skills, each one went into at least one of his three main super abilities. Yeah, nothing fancy there. He gets a +1 at 3rd level. I think again at another +1 at 9th level, 6th level maybe, and then I think 11th level. So in the end, he'll have a +4 eventually, just using those powers. And that one, and you can find that one in the Game Master's Guide for Heroes Unlimited. That's on page 123. Secondary skills. Again, we really don't get too much into Chris Powell's life, especially when it comes to showing what skills he knows. But we do know that later on he does try and become a police officer. So we try and reflect a little bit of that. So, high school kid, figure, all right, give him computer operation, learn how to use internet, research, okay, makes sense, high school student, book reports and stuff. Well, like I said, power automobile, not a free skill for him, but he can at least try and learn. So figure he's had some lessons from his dad before he found out his dad was a crooked criminal. Sorry if that's a spoiler. High schools, a lot of them require you to take a foreign language. I've never seen them speak any foreign language. Not for nothing, for New York City, Spanish is a very common language for a lot of high school students. So I could totally see him forgetting how to speak Spanish, but at least understanding some words in Spanish. Then we have Streetwise, finding things out in the criminal underworld on the street. Baseball, because he's a teenager. We do see him playing baseball with his little brothers in the comic books. Decided to give him ambidexterity, which is tied in with training from when he encounters St. Johnny, who's teaching him how to fight and use his abilities. And that's why we also have the weapon proficiency, blunt weapons. I did give him the weapon proficiency for revolver, and that's more, again, tied to his father. I'm sure maybe his father took him out when he was younger to the gun ranges and stuff like that, so hopefully he does have some experience firing a revolver. I decided to go with revolver because since the comic is a lot older, revolvers were still sort of common back then, so maybe his dad was more of a classic weapon type of guy. Instead of using automatic pistol, he trusted a revolver more. So that's it. That, I mean, if you want to switch out to automatic pistol, go for it. And then for his 3rd level secondary skills, I decided to give him Netwise. Figure he's figured out the usefulness of the internet, so now he has learned to use the dark web and stuff like that to try and look for information on finding criminals. So Netwise makes a good start for him. And then Law General is basically representing him later on in life when he becomes an NYPD officer. So here, at this point, he started to have an interest in law, and he's starting to learn more about the law. Nothing fancy there. Actually, just trying to burn skills because I have no idea any other skills he has, because everything else after his series ended was basically him in space or as a guard at Project Pegasus. So then for his hand-to-hand, like I said, he has expert. He has 5 attacks in both forms. He has a +3 in both forms. Chris Powell has a +5 to strike and a +7 to parry and dodge, while Darkhawk has a +8 to strike and a +10 to parry and dodge. Darkhawk can also do a lot more damage with a punch at +17, while Chris Powell has no damage modifiers. And then you'll see here Restrained Punch, Full Strength Punch, Power Kick. Those are more optional rules in my game because his robotic form, he is an android, he does have robotic strength. Let me just look through. I think that's relatively it, right? Yeah. So Darkhawk, like I said, ability wise, he's got robotic strength. He can lift 4.16 tons, lift 6.24 tons, can run 640 yards a minute. That comes out to 21.8 miles per hour. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's about it for Darkhawk. I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit and hopefully should be good. All right, guys, we are back. We finished up Darkhawk, cleaned them up. Let's go through it. First, I'm going to do a Chris Powell's attributes. So, Chris, normal human being, he has hit points 21, SDC 39, PPE of 24, IQ of 10, mental endurance 15, mental affinity 9, physical strength of 12, physical prowess of 20, physical endurance 12, physical beauty 12, speed 23. So for him, his speed his mental endurance, and his physical prowess, those are his highest stats as a human being. Darkhawk, on the other hand, IQ and mental endurance are the same. His mental affinity is 18. His physical strength is 32, 27 for physical prowess, physical endurance 29, physical beauty 21, but only when he's fully armored. Speed 32. Chris can carry 120 pounds, lift 240. Darkhawk, on the other hand, thanks to his android body and robotic strength, can carry 4.16 tons and lift 6.24 tons. Chris, based on his speed, can run 15 miles per hour, a little bit more, 15.7 to be exact. Darkhawk, on the other hand, can run 21.8 miles per hour. Chris Powell is reliant on his talisman to transform into Darkhawk. Without it, he is screwed. That is a bad weakness for him. Yeah, I felt Enchanted Object was the best way to go about him. Originally, I did want to do Mystic Bestowed, but since I do remember him being so reliant on the talisman in the comics, especially like the early issues, I thought the Enchanted Object was a better way to go. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching, and leave some comments. What did you think? What would you have done differently? Drop some character suggestions you would like to see converted. I have a couple in mind that I'm working up slowly. Some are Marvel. There's at least one DC. Thank you for watching, and I hope you stay tuned for more conversions. Until then, take care. Have a good night. Bye. I also wanted to thank Amelia Elizabeth Evershed for giving me permission to use this photo of classic Darkhawk. It's gorgeous. I'll put the link for her ArtStation down below. Please check her out. She's got some great work. Thank you. Take care.